There we go. Now we're good.
Good. So, welcome everyone, and we're off uh, to our first session of the Deep Resilience program, our Self Care 2.0. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more what we mean by those terms and how we're going to explore what deep resilience means, not just conceptually, but in a very, I hope, experiential and practical way that will be truly helpful. That is the intention. So, in the next hour, I'll begin with sharing some ideas and talking particularly about the first step in the 7 step process. I'll then do a little short practice with you, which will be relevant to this first step, which will include setting up our sit spot. And I'll say more about what I mean by that and what that's about in a little bit. Then I hope we'll have some time for discussion and question and answer, and then we'll go into just a few logistics of how things will kind of move forward. So, I took this photo the other day when I was out on a hike on the San Isidro Trail here in Santa Barbara. And I've noticed this tree before, and I've always been kind of taken by its beautiful branches. This oak, I think, really quite an old oak, not huge, but it just has that kind of sense of being aged. And what I noticed when I was last on the trail um, was that the trunk had actually blown over in a storm. And so it's kind of lying on its side, as you see here, kind of we're kind of looking into the canopy. And the branches are sort of on the ground, as you can see. But you can also see, I hope, that the branches of the oak tree are in bloom. The branches, the leaves are the new oak leaves are just kind of budding and bursting forth and catching the sunlight. And so, for me, this is an image that really goes with what His Holiness the Dalai Lama is saying here. He says, a tree with strong roots can withstand the most violent storm. But the tree cannot grow roots just as the storm appears on the horizon. So that's what this program is about. It's about putting our roots down now, but it's acknowledging that we are already in the midst of storms. Obviously, there are storms on all sides. We look at the environment, we look at the natural world, and we see a world on fire. We look um, we look and we see the wars that are unfolding in the Ukraine, in the Middle East, in Gaza, in Sudan, and close to home, we have all the turmoil um, that we're all experiencing on a kind of daily basis and all the uncertainty that goes with that. So, what this program is about helping us to put down strong, deep roots now, ahead of whatever storms may come our way in the future, so that those roots are in place, like they were in place for that little oak tree when the wind actually blew it over, but it survived that storm because of its rootedness. So we're living in a world not just of great uncertainty and change. We're living in a world where we really are experiencing a pandemic of burnout. And there's a lot of evidence of this, including this large international study from 2002, which looked at over 10,000 individuals in many different countries and found that there was a prevalence of burnout in in 70% of people of all ages and in 84% of Gen Z reporting symptoms of burnout in the prior year. So we're really living in this pandemic of burnout. And why is this? I think part of it is that we don't actually recognize burnout. And the second reason is we don't obviously have very good ways of mitigating, preventing it, or finding our way through it. So, just real quickly, what are the symptoms of burnout so we can recognize it perhaps in ourselves? A sense of overwhelming exhaustion, not just physical but emotional. A sense of depersonalization, of feeling a little disconnected and distanced in one's reality, in one's work, in one's relationships. And a sort of ongoing sense of lack of personal accomplishment, which means just never quite achieving the sort of quality, the sort of outcome that you're hoping for in your life, in your work. So kind of just asking ourselves, do I feel overwhelmed and depleted even after I've had a break, even after I've had a chance to rest, even after a good vacation? Do I still feel that sense of depletion? Do I feel numb, a little surreal, a little disconnected or disengaged from myself, from others, from life, from work? Do I find that I'm always falling a little short in my efforts? But perhaps notice at the same time that I'm not caring about this as much as I might have done in the past. If we meet one or more of these, it may well be that we are on that spectrum of burnout. And we need self-care, even if we're not burnt out. We're living in a world of so much moral distress, so much compassion fatigue, so much kind of overwhelming mindless bureaucracy, and just so much suffering that we need self-care. But again, as I said a little while ago, self-care as we've known it and practiced it up to now is just not enough. It can help us in the moment. It can help us survive stressful short-term situations. But if we're living with ongoing exposure to stress and uncertainty, as all of us living as sentient beings in our world it's simply not enough. We need something more. We need self-care 2.0. We need deep resilience. But what is this deep resilience? So I want to share two kind of ways of thinking about deep resilience. The first are teachings I've received from this particular redwood that you see at the center of the picture here. Looks like a young redwood, but in fact it's a very old redwood. And I'll tell you the story. So here's what it looks like now. And just take a minute. Let's just take a moment in silence just to be with this redwood as it is just now. This is how that redwood looked in November 2020 when I visited the redwood forest in Big Sur just after a fire had moved through and devastated the area, burnt a lot of the redwoods. And this particular redwood, as you can see, its trunk had broken midway. Now, what you don't get a sense there is the size of that redwood. That is at least 6 feet across in diameter. It's enormous. It must have been over 200 feet tall, I suspect. And here it is, still standing, but broken in the trunk, and the bark just utterly, charred and charcoaled. I took it for dead. That was November 2020. When I went back in November 2024, this is what it looks like, what we've just seen. it had not only survived, but it was flourishing. It had put out shoots that had now become branches. It was regenerating as a tree, as a beautiful tree. So how is this possible? Well, um, I partly got the answer to how this was possible from just around the corner. I came across this huge oak tree that had been upended, as you see here, obviously in a big storm, and probably a big rain that had kind of softened the soil. And you can see, it's got quite a root system, and yet despite that, it had been toppled over. And I just kind of thought about the redwood around the corner when I had met it in 2020. It had obviously been not just burnt, but it had obviously been struck by another tree falling with such impact that it broke the trunk, but it didn't knock it over. So one of the reasons it had not just survived but was thriving was because of its root system. So this is, a graphic of what a root system of an oak tree looks like. The roots go down, they go deep. But here's what the roots of a redwood look like. They go deep, but they also go lateral. And they have this really strong intertwining lateral root system. So that redwood stump would have had roots intertwining with the roots of other redwoods, the roots of other trees, oak trees and other trees in the area. And also you might have noticed there was kind of huge rocks behind it, so those roots probably going in under those rocks, all adding to its stability, this lateral interweaving, intertwining root system. And in addition to its lateral root system, it has these deeper roots which go down, and they merge and they blend and they become one with the mycorrhizal network, the fungal network that has been referred to as the wood wide web that connects all the trees and all the plants in the forest. This kind of highway of reciprocity between the trees and the fungi giving minerals and water to the tree, and the tree giving sugars and carbon to the fungi in this ongoing exchange, and not just nutrients and minerals, but also chemical signals, information being passed into this network. So that redwood had not just survived, but was thriving the fire, the ultimate burnout, because of its root system, because of these strong, deep roots that also intertwined in this lateral way with other roots, but also because of it being tapped into this living, dynamic web. And that's what gave it its deep resilience. And that for me is a wonderful teaching on what we need for deep resilience. Now, I just wanted to explore one other way of looking at this, at a kind of reflecting on the question what we mean by deep resilience. What do we mean by Self-Care 2.0? And this is to look at this map of Celtic cosmology. So this is a Celtic way of understanding the world we live in, but it's also not just a map of reality for the Celts, it's also a map of the human psyche. So for the Celts, there are within this circle, there are three circles, as you can see, three concentric circles. The outer one is called Cruanna, the middle one is called Altar, and the central one is called Neart. So what is Cruanna? Cruanna, that outer layer, is a bit like the crust of the earth, and it's everything on the surface. It's all the forests, it's all the oceans, it's all the cities, it's all the people, it's all the insects, it's all the birds, it's all the atmosphere, it's all the rivers, mountains. It's all of the everyday, objective, concrete, relative reality that we see. It's a world of dualism, of light, night and day, of hot and cold, but also, psychologically of happy and unhappy, of good and bad. And it's a world of dualism. It's a world where the ego is in charge, where the ego rules, that executive functioning part of our psyche, which is so necessary for negotiating those polarities and those dualisms and just survival in the world. It's the world of consciousness. So that's the outer layer in this Celtic map of the psyche and of the world. The second, the middle zone, if you like, is called altar. And altar is for the Celts what's often referred to as the other world. It's the world of the unconscious. It's the world of dreams. It's the world of visions. In Jungian terms, it's the world of the shadow. It's a world where the ego, as in the dream, is still part of the picture, but it's not in charge, just as the ego isn't in charge of what happens in our dream life. So that is the world of altar, and the world of our repressed emotions, memories, also. So that is altar. But then the Celts had this inner core, which they called Njart, which it literally means nothing. It's a word for nothing, but it's not nothing as a nihilism. It's nothing as in nothing solid, separate. So there's no solid, separate self in Njart. It's a world in a way deeper than ego. It's a world that could be referred to as ultimate reality. It's a world of non-duality. And in terms of this program, and in terms of Deep Resilience, and in terms of Self-Care 2.0, this inner zone, the zone of Njart, is key, is essential. And we'll be exploring it more, not just conceptually, but hopefully experientially in the ways I'll be talking about in a moment. So how does this relate to self-care? And to look at this more closely, I want to share this image with you. And this was my first experiment with working with AI. And so AI and I came up with this image together. And again, you can see here the three concentric circles. You can see the outer rim, like kind of the forest rim, all the way around is the outer world of Cruana. Then there's the middle zone of altar, the world of dreams and visions. And then there's the inner core of Njart, of no-thingness. And then, how does self-care relate to all of this? Well, self-care 1.0 is really about that outer layer. It's about caring for the trees in the forest, and maybe more specifically caring for a single tree. We're looking after. It's about self-preservation. It's about how can we take care of ourselves in a stressful, difficult situation. So that's what self-care 1.0 looks like. What I sometimes refer to as self-care 1.5 is doing basic self-care of protecting ourselves in stressful situations, and restoring ourselves outside those stressful situations, doing all of that, but doing it with this deeper dimension, bringing in the altar, bringing in the unconscious, bringing in so that brings in mindfulness, that brings in self-awareness, and that is what I refer to as self-care 1.5, if you like. But again, it's often thought of in terms of the individual and caring for the self, obviously. Self-care 2.0 includes Karuna and Altar. It includes self-care 1 and 1.5, but it also includes Nyart. It includes ways of tapping into, of opening up to, of experiencing, of embodying this deep core dimension of experience. And that's what self-care 2.0 looks like. And it's not just caring for the individual tree, it's caring for the whole forest. It's recognizing that we are forest. We're trees in a forest. And we're part of a greater whole. And it's no longer a kind of a hard line around the individual. It's more porous. It's more open. And really the distinguishing factor for me of what Self-Care 2.0 Deep Resilience is all about is this central core. And you know, there are many names and no names for this. From a Buddhist perspective, you know, talk about Buddha nature, about love, compassion, wisdom. From a Christian perspective, maybe talk about Christ consciousness. But you know, and so many different kind of faith traditions and spiritual traditions come up with their own language and their own framing of what this central core is about. I kind of would like for now just to leave it with, you know, the Native American way of talking about it as the great mystery, recognizing its greatness, but also recognizing that there's something unknowable about it in terms of kind of trying to get it with our conceptual mind. And yet it is possible to experience this, to tap into this. And that's what we will be exploring together. And that's what Deep Resilience is about, that we're not just relying on caring for the trees above ground. We're not just relying on having good lateral roots and even good deep roots, but we're really recognizing that where those deep roots ultimately go, just like kind of the metaphor of the mycorrhizal network as this web that kind of includes the whole forest, that ultimately where those roots are, they're part of this this great mystery. They tap into this central core of love, of wisdom, of compassion. And there are many paths, just as there are many great spiritual traditions and secular traditions that can bring one to that experience of Nyart, of our deep essence, our deep togetherness. There are many paths there. And we will be kind of featuring these two in this program, the path of nature and the path of particular meditation practices that can help us to experience this deep oneness, this deep non-duality. And we'll be working with those practices. And we'll be following this 7-step path to deep resilience. and I talked about these in the introductory talks. So those of you that attended one of those will have heard me talking about this in a little bit more depth. And I won't go into each of these in detail now, but just quickly to go through, we're going to be saying more about step number 1 tonight and having a little taste of it in a moment with the practice. We're then going to, next Wednesday, we'll be talking about the second step, which is really, awakening the heart, opening up a field of care. The third step will be really thinking about self-care 1.0. These are really survival skills that are just necessary and essential, and an essential part of self-care 2.0, that we really know how to protect ourselves and how to restore ourselves. Step 4 is really thinking about those lateral roots of the redwood, those healing connections, and identifying what those are for us. Do we have them, or do we not have them? And if we do have them, if we recognize them, are there ways we can strengthen those healing connections, and how are we going to do that? Step 5 will be really coming down into those deeper roots, those roots that lead into the mycorrhizal network, and that deep experience of reciprocity. And step 6 is really kind of that deepest ground, or what Meister Eckhart the mystic referred to as the groundless ground of open awareness, of non-duality, the whole world of Nyart. How do we recognize that? How do we rest in that? How do we actualize that? How do we have our roots in that? And then all of that is a dynamic kind of root system that enables us to come back into our lives and into our world and into our work, to be present, to be compassionate, but to be able to do that in a way that is sustainable, because we're no longer then doing it as a well-intentioned, hardworking ego. We're now doing it tapped into the source, if you like. We have become a field of care, and we're in a way channeling that in our presence, in our world. Okay, so all of that is again kind of just a little background, and then let's just kind of spend the rest of our time together talking about and tasting a little bit, experiencing a little bit step 1. So step 1 is really about setting up and setting out on our deep resilience journey. And it begins by setting our intention, in the sense of becoming conscious of our motive, our motivation for setting out on this path. And obviously our motivation is very individual, it's very personal, and so there's no kind of suggestion about what your motivation or intention for setting out on this journey should be. It's just pointing out the value of making conscious one's motive, one's intention, as you begin this journey, of asking yourself, why am I doing this? And not expecting to get a kind of a head answer to it. It's not about thinking this through. It's kind of more like, what does my heart have to say about why I would like to be more deeply resilient? So just imagine, letting that question sit like a feather. If you imagine your heart is like a nest, just let that question, what does my heart have to say about why I can be in the world in a more deeply resilient way? And let this question sit just like a feather in the nest of your heart, and wait and see what emerges. So setting our intention, as I say, isn't just something we do with our head. It's about listening deeply to the heart's intention and trying to discern that, because making that conscious is the first step on the journey. Now, sit spot practice is one of the really key practices for deep resilience. And as I mentioned, the two paths we'll be working with, you can sometimes refer to them as the earth path and the sky path, but this is really about the earth path. And this is really about learning from nature and nature as our teacher. And so this is a practice of, let me just kind of take you through some simple instruction about sit spot. I learned about sit spot and the phrase sit spot from John Young, who teaches nature connection, who wrote a beautiful book called What the Robin Knows about bird language, which is really about listening deeply to nature and how we can do that in our backyard in a very simple but very deep way. So he describes the sit spot as identifying a place in nature that you can visit frequently and get to know as your best friend. Let this be a place where you learn to sit still, alone, often, and quietly. This will become your place of intimate connection with nature. So that kind of sums it up simply, nicely. It's somewhere you can visit frequently and easily. So you may have some amazing places in the natural world that are, when you think of your favorite places in nature, that's what comes to mind. But it may be, Yellowstone National Park, or that visit you made to the outback in Australia, or maybe just somewhere very special, but somewhere very inaccessible. So not to say that there aren't moments for going and spending, if possible, prolonged periods of time in those places where you feel a special connection with the land and the landscape. But the sit spot is really about something every day, somewhere you can access as easily as your backyard, or if you don't have a backyard, your balcony, or perhaps a park nearby. For me, it's my backyard, or if it's not my backyard, it's a walk I take every day to the forest by the Natural History Museum with my dog. And so just to identify what that is for you. And then once you identify that, how you approach the landscape, how you approach the place matters. John talks about the importance of, as you approach it, literally as you walk out to that tree in your garden or in your yard, or you go to sit in that rock in the park nearby, as you approach it, that your zone of awareness is greater than your zone of disturbance. So you're kind of consciously expanding your awareness. What's, I think, even more important is the attitude with which you approach the landscape. And again, this is a quote, and it comes from Bird Baylor, who's a Native American writer, in her book Another Way to Listen. It's a children's book, and it's about a little boy who learns how to listen to how the earth speaks from his grandfather, who teaches him. And his grandfather says, one of the first things you've got to do if you really want to hear what the earth has to say to you is you have to respect that one thing you're paying attention to, whether it's a tree or a hill or whatever it is you're with. You have to respect it. He said, take a horned toad, for example. If you think you're better than a horned toad, you'll never hear its voice, even if you sit there in the sun forever. So part of the attitude is an attitude of deep humility in a way. We're not superior, we're different. and these other beings have an intelligence and an experience and things to teach us that we simply don't know and maybe can't know. So having that attitude of humility and respect, knowing that we're in the presence of beings far older and in many ways far wiser than us. And so when we're in place, when we're coming into the sit spot, when we're spending time there, when we're listening, we're coming with that attitude of respect, and we're listening to nature, and we're letting, as John Moriarty puts it, the Irish philosopher, letting nature happen to us. So when you arrive at your sit spot, and this may be, ideally it'd be great if you can make your sit spot practice maybe 10 or 20 minutes part of, ideally every day if you can do it, if you can work it into your day like a dog walk, or maybe kind of meditation in your back garden, or but just at least 2 or 3 times a week, and ideally kind of somewhere between 10-20 minutes. On arrival, expressing gratitude, honoring the 7 directions, the east, the south, the west, the north, the sky, the heart, the earth. And then either sitting in your place or standing, and kind of identifying somewhere in the place that is your anchor point. It might be a rock you sit on, there might be a little seat there, it might be a tree you lean against, but that's your anchor point, from which you wait, you watch, you listen with beginner's mind, really without an agenda. It's about listening. It's about deep listening with your sense doors wide open. And so, it is about that listening to the earth. It's about letting nature be our teacher, with that attitude of humility. And so the twin part of the practice is meditation. And the meditation that goes with step 1 is really sense meditation, that really goes with setting up the sit spot. And I'm going to tell you a little bit what I mean by this, first of all, and then we'll just do a 5-minute little kind of taster of what it's like. But I introduce this as a practice, a very simple practice of sensory engagement with your sit spot, in your sit spot, with a particular aspect or particular being or a particular something in your sit spot that catches your attention and your interest and your curiosity. How you engage with that. That's what sense meditation is about, through your senses, through sensory awareness. So the first thing you do is you choose which sense door, or which sense you're going to work with, whether it's sight, hearing, touching, smelling, or tasting. The second step is you focus your sensory awareness on an object of meditation. The third is you open that sense door wide. So this can really be helped by kind of opening up storyteller's mind. And for example, if you choose sight, just imagine that you're looking at what you're looking, you're seeing what you're seeing with owl's eyes, those huge open eyes, that huge lateral vision, almost 360 degrees, well, certainly 180 degrees, but that huge kind of almost panoramic open vision of owl's eyes. Or if you're working with hearing as the sense door, just imagine that I'm listening with deer's ears, those huge open doors of the ear that can swivel in different directions with great sensitivities, and so on. So you bring in storyteller's mind as a way of opening the sense door more widely. Then you rest back into receptive mode. As John Moriarty said, you let nature happen to you. You notice that as you do this, just as when you're doing mindfulness of breathing, it's really a mindfulness practice I'm describing here. as you do this, your mind comes right in with comments, thoughts, objections, analysis. But as soon as you notice this with your awareness, with your mindfulness, as soon as you notice this, you let go of that thought and you allow your awareness to drop from your thinking back into your body and to rest once more in the effortless flow of seeing what you're seeing or hearing what you're hearing. And you do that gently, without blame, without judgment, with kindness towards yourself, because it's going to happen again and again and again. But you do this again and again and again and again, letting nature happen to you, coming back into that flow of seeing, that open door of seeing, and simply seeing what you're seeing. The effortless flow of sensing, of seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, and letting that flow of sensing draw you into oneness with it. This is a really key and important move, and it's one that I've learned just relatively recently from a Dzogchen teacher, John McCransky. But it's a very simple, but a very, in my experience, very profound move, where you experiencing the sensing, the flow, you're letting it happen, the door is open, but then you let the feeling of that flow to draw you into oneness with it in such a way that the sensing is now doing the knowing and the meditating for you. You've kind of let go of control a little bit. It's actually an experience of stepping out of ego control into something bigger and letting it happen to you. And then you simply let everything be and relax with open attention, without expectation, with beginner's mind. So the suggestion is that you approach your place, you choose your place, you approach your place with that attitude of awareness greater than disturbance, with that attitude of respect. You choose which sense you're going to work with something that catches your interest or your curiosity in the place on that particular morning or time of the day when you're there. You work with that sense in the way I've just described, and then you settle back into just simply being there with open attention, with beginner's mind, and notice what comes towards you. So let's just do a little kind of taste of that as an experience, if you'd like to do it. And so I invite you just simply to find your meditation posture, your feet on the ground, straight back. Maybe close your eyes and allow your thinking mind to drop down into your body, and allow your body to drop down into the earth. And now, when you're ready, I invite you to open your eyes and to see before you this single green leaf. And I invite you to focus on the leaf. Just really take in the detail. Take in the detail of the shape of the leaf, its color, little veins, its little tail, how it's connected to the branch above it, how it's catching the sunlight. And then, when you're ready, I invite you to imagine that you're looking at leaf with owl's eyes, with wide open, soft, 180 degrees, just wide open, the doors of your seeing wide open. And just resting back into seeing what you're seeing. The raw sensation, the raw experience of seeing what you see. Notice how your mind will have comments, will have names, will have labels, will have descriptions, maybe objections. Just notice that. And for now, just let those be. Just let them be where they are. And allow your awareness to fall back into your body, to drop down into the open doors of your seeing, to the simple seeing of your seeing. And simply letting life happen to you. Open, receptive, letting seeing happen to you. Letting the greenness, the openness of leaf happen to you. Letting the effortless flow of seeing what you're seeing happen to you. And now, allow the effortless flow of seeing to draw you into oneness with it. Letting the effortless flow of seeing what you're seeing draw you into oneness with it. So that the openness of the seeing is doing the knowing and the meditating for you. And let this openness, this flow, allow your mind and heart to relax, to let go of its chains of thinking, to rest back into its openness, its awareness. Letting this openness, this awareness, do the knowing for you. By simply letting everything be. So that's just a little taste of the sense meditation and how you can work with sight in that way with the leaf, how you could work with sound with bird song, how you could work with touch with the bark of a tree, or the smoothness of a stone or the cold of a stone. So you can, the sense door can become a door into deep connection and deep openness and deep listening. So really just summary, just to kind of say moving forward, um, week one, just kind of what I said at the beginning about intention, just reflecting on your motive for setting out on this path. Encouragement to think about and to set up a sit spot and begin a sit spot practice, and to begin to work with maybe this sense meditation practice in its kind of simplicity. And I wanted to just add one final little piece, and that is, we're living in a time, and this could be a whole hour long on itself, and it may be later on, but we're living in a time where the web of connections that we're all part of are so tattered and torn because of all that's happening. And so I just encourage you to think in terms of web repair, to think, what one thread of repair, of web repair, could I work with in these coming times? What one thread of repair, one step will I take to help to rebuild the web, one small thread at a time? That's maybe all we can do, but it's possible. So just that as the kind of practices as we move forward. And just a few minutes before we finish with for some Q&A, and let me just come out of here. So I'll stop the share for a moment, and just love to hear if anybody has any comments, any questions, any thoughts you'd like to share. Just put up your hand if you would, and we'll open your mic. Hi, Susanna, please. Yeah, just.
So I'm thinking the sit spot would be pretty regular, but our ways of connecting, whether, connecting through which sense door we use, we might experiment with that or see what calls to us in the moment.
Totally. And and those are just suggestions about how you could be in your sit spot. I think the important thing is kind of choosing a spot, and maybe making the choice to actually make this practice, to try it out, make it part of your life. And honestly, it's going to work best if it becomes a somewhat regular part of your life. It's, one or two visits there might be kind of disappointing, but it's kind of over time, you get to know the place gets to know you. You get to know the neighbors that you're living with, they get to know you. You begin to notice more and more. So that kind of continuity is really key. And I think kind of just primarily kind of that attitude of going in with receptivity and curiosity and receptivity, and kind of deep heart listening rather than kind of trying to kind of get it with our head. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Anybody else? Please.
Yolanda, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the connection with the self-care level 1, 1.5, and 2. That was such a beautiful image. The trees in the center and caring about the interconnectivity. I love the eco psychology and the way it just brought me right into that leaf, and that heart shaped leaf with the veins. Of just felt like I was being with sort of like, the veins of life, and
Mm,
each vein leading to all of you, all of us looking at the same
mm.
heart, veins, leaf. And then I think you said something like, let that let that be with you, or something like that. And it just instantly was there. So I just really enjoyed the guidance. And
Yeah,
I think I
thanks.
took a screenshot so I could have the leaf again later. Thank
Oh,
you.
good. Oh, good. Well, thank you, Yolanda. That's beautiful. And, just to say, it reminds me just to let you know there, because I put out a little podcast just reminding people about the program yesterday, and a number of people wrote and said they couldn't be tonight, and people in Europe kind of said, "Oh, we'd love to be there, but it's 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever." But we've recorded the session, and we've stopped recording now, Andrew, have we? Did you stop at the end? Oh, yeah, good.
I'll
Yeah,
just resume again. Um,
thank you.
but hi, everyone. So nice to meet you. Yeah, I am extremely jet lagged coming from Tanzania, but so excited to be here and be a part of this. It's really special and close to my heart. So grateful. Thank you all. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for being
And
here.
Michael,
Yes?
ah, sweet, sweet one. Thank you so much with all my heart that you have doing this program with so needed. Like we've been in this desert of not enough water and love and whatever, and you bring that, and all the other community people do too. And I just want to say I'm so grateful to all of
Oh,
you.
thank you, Sarah, and it's lovely to have you here. And you're somebody who really has that incredible deep nature connection, and I hope you'll be able to share some of that with us over our times together. So thanks for being here.
And
Um,
Michael, I'll send you, you know, you know, not here, but later, this wonderful photograph. I used to be a photographer, and of the veins of this leaf.
mm,
It,
okay, please do, Sarah.
I will.
That's, I know you're an incredible photographer. I love your photographs.
Thank
So,
you.
but so just again, quickly, the logistics. We'll be here every Wednesday night from 7 till 8 p.m. Obviously, there'll kind of be a break in the summer, but we're good. I see this as an ongoing kind of program that once we get through the 7 steps, we'll start again and go through. Um, and It's the first Wednesday of each month will be the sit spot check-in, and Wednesday the 2nd of April will be the first of those, in coming up in April, beginning of April. Then the last Wednesday of each month will be a meditation teaching and practice check-in, and Radley will be a big part of that, obviously, and she'll be with me next week for our next week's teaching, which will be about opening and awakening the heart and practices. And she's just coming back from another week with John McCransky, so we'll be kind of teaching his incredible field of care practices. But that last Wednesday of the month will be a time to check in with our meditation practices. And then you're invited and encouraged indeed to attend. Through Mindful Hearts, we offer weekday meditations every day at 7:30 in the morning and at 10 a.m. in the morning, and then on Monday nights at Yoga Soup, and then Peter Moreno does one at the Cancer Center. And so we're really encouraging you. All of these are open, are there's no charge. And so please do come along. And just to maybe highlight the one that Radley and I do each Sunday morning together at 10 a.m. through the website. It's on this, specifically on this theme of deep resilience. We've been doing it since, actually since the beginning of COVID, every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And then just for your calendar, some upcoming events on May 24th at the Sedgwick Reserve. There'll be a day long, and I'll say more as we go along about the actual program, but it'll be really going in depth to particular aspects of deep resilience, and particularly nature-based aspects of deep resilience, because it's this incredible location. And then we'll actually be having a 4-day retreat at the Sedgwick Reserve on deep resilience and nature-based and meditation-based practices into deep resilience in November. So, and then kind of finally, I've been asked, just as always, just to remind everyone, these programs, there is no charge, but Mindful Hearts is a non-profit, and there are costs involved with kind of renting out locations and one thing or another. So please consider making a monthly subscription or making a one-time donation or whatever you can afford. I'm not sure. I tried out this QR code recently and it just led me to PayPal. So I'm not sure this works. But if you would like to make a donation, if you go to Mindful Hearts, it's easy to make a donation that way. So with that,